Genesis. We're back in the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 31 is where we are. You guys remember pre-Mother's Day, Jacob realized, God told Jacob that his time in Haran was over. God told Jacob, it's time for you to leave Uncle Whitey. Because remember, Laban in Hebrew means white. And so Uncle Whitey has treated Jacob horribly during his 20-year journey and his stay there. And God has instructed Jacob that it's time to return to the land of promise and to his father, Yitzhak, or Isaac. However, God didn't tell Jacob to flee like a fugitive, which would pour salt in the wound of Laban, who has already made Jacob persona non grata in the family. Jacob is resolute that Laban is now a problem. And what does Jacob do with problems? He doesn't confront them. What does Jacob do? He runs away from problems. Here are some quotes about running away from problems. If you run away from your problems, you'll never stop running. You can't. Another one says you can't run away from your problems. They'll always find you. A third quote said, running away from your problems is a race, but you'll never win. You cannot heal what you refuse to face. Jacob has a history of running away from problems. He ran away from his brother Esau when they had a problem, and he ran to his uncle Laban. Now that he's fallen out with Laban, now he's running away from Laban. And Jacob has to learn as he's evolving and as his character is being formed right before our eyes that you can't run away from your problems. They will catch up with you. And so Jacob is running again in the text, and what we find is that we shouldn't be a people who runs away from our problems. We got to confront our problems. So Jacob has a hard lesson to learn because he thinks that he's running away from problem number 2. I got a problem with my brother, now I got a problem with my uncle, and I don't confront anybody, I just run. And some of you may deal with your problems, the challenges in your life that way just by running. And the Bible says that the guilty flee when no one is chasing after them, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. And so Jacob has issues, and so he's always running. And God is challenging us as his people to confront the problems that won't go away. And so here in this text today, as we look at 2 major sections in the text, verses 22 through 35, Laban confronts Jacob. Last time we were with them, Jacob has had a come to Jesus conversation with his wives, and he says, hey, your father has treated me terribly. Now he's given me the cold shoulder, and we're going back home. Are you guys with me? And all 4 of his wives said, hey, we're with you. And so Jacob packs up the kids in the caravan, packs up the luggage, and all of his servants, the flocks, the herds, and they make their way toward Canaan. But Jacob does it while Laban and his sons are away shearing the sheep and the flocks, which is, a 3 to 7, 12-day enterprise to make sure that the flocks are sheared. And so Jacob makes his flight back to Canaan when he knows that Laban is away and busy. But Laban finds out that Jacob is taking his daughters and his grandchildren, and he wants to confront Jacob. Look at the text with me as Laban not only confronts Jacob, but to confront him, he's got to catch up with him in verses 22 through 25. Look at the first movement in the text. It says, on the 3rd day, Laban was told that Jacob fled and that he took his relatives. So he took his relatives with him, Laban did, and he pursued Jacob for 7 days and overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. Laban finds out, hey man, Jacob is gone, your daughters are gone, and your grandchildren are gone. So what does Laban do? He gets his relatives. You know, when you get into a fight and you got a problem, what you go? You go get your backup. You go get your cousin, your sister, your brother, your mama, and everybody. And then we going after the people who did us. Y'all did that before? I know I did. You messed with me, I was going to go get everybody. And Laban is not happy, and so he goes and gets some men, some relatives to go and help him because he's going to go deal with this Jacob problem. Now, what I find fascinating in this text, it says that Laban pursued Jacob. Pursue is this Hebrew word radab, and it means to chase after with the intent of persecuting or doing harm. Laban is coming after Jacob, and he's got bad intentions. And so what does Uncle Whitey do when he catches up with Jacob? Before he can catch up with him, look at verse 24. I love these beautiful words. Some of the two most beautiful words in the Bible says, but God. Uncle Whitey is out to bring about retribution on Jacob, but God. Somebody say those two words with me, but God. It says, but God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream at night. And what does God say to Laban? Watch yourself. God warned him, don't say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Don't bless Jacob. Don't curse Jacob. Don't go too far. God knows that Laban has got bad intentions when he catches up with Jacob, and God warns him. He admonishes him. He puts a restraining order on Laban and says, watch yourself. Don't go too far or you're going to have to deal with me. Can I just say, for all of the folks in your life that got bad intentions for you, I want you to know that God knows that they got bad intentions, and God is putting a restraining order on what they can do in your life. In your family, in your friend circles, at work, in whatever dealings and whatever's going on, God knows when people have set a trap for you. And so it's not oblivious to God. He's not distant and aloof where he doesn't know that people are planning your demise. And God is issuing restraining orders on behalf of his people. Then in verse 25, after God restrains Laban, verse 25 says, when Laban overtook Jacob, Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban and his relatives also pitched their tents in the hill country. Now, there's a time and distance discrepancy in this text. The hill country of Galilee, some say is 400 miles from Haran. Some say it's 300 miles. So I think the average is probably about 350 miles. For Jacob to have traveled with 4 wives and 12 children and a massive flock and herds and camels and male and female servants is probably very difficult and next to impossible. So we think that these numbers are being used as symbolic numbers, not as literal numbers, because you can't travel 350 miles with a massive entourage and caravan like that in 10 days. You would have to travel about 30, 35 miles a day, and people just didn't travel that many miles on foot. That in the heat of the day, it just didn't happen. So we think that Moses is using these numbers figuratively and not literally. And so maybe this journey is probably in their 20th and 30th day, probably is more reasonable than a massive caravan. Because remember, Jacob and his servants have to herd flock. And you know what sheep and goats like to do? They like to graze. They don't move fast. They're distracted. So to have to, direct them 300 plus miles, it's 500 miles to get to Canaan. They still got another 200 miles to go. And so you don't make that trip fast. So these numbers, so I just want to point out to you that Moses is probably using these as round numbers and not as literal numbers. So I didn't want to jump over that because that is an important dynamic. I don't want anybody to think that I believe that they went 350 miles in 10 days. That's that's near impossible. So Jacob is caught. Laban has caught up with him because, again, Laban is moving faster than Jacob. Jacob has got wives and kids and and Laban and his relatives are probably on horses or on something, so they're moving a lot faster than Jacob, which allows them to catch up with Jacob, even though he's had a 3-day head start. Now, in this next section, Laban, when he catches up with Jacob, he charges him with 2 injustices. Look at this text, because Laban is not happy with his nephew. And so look at the charges he brings against Jacob. And this case is going to be tried in the court of public opinion. Laban has brought his relatives, well, Jacob's relatives, they're all family. And so Laban has brought his tribe with him. Jacob has got his 4 wives and his 12 kids and his male and female servants. And so there's an entourage, there's an audience here of witnesses in which this case is going to be tried. And so look at Laban's charges against his nephew, who's also his son-in-law. Verse 26, Laban said to Yaakov, to Jacob, "What have you done? You have deceived me and taken my daughters away like prisoners of war. Why did you secretly flee from me? Deceive me and not tell me. I would have sent you away with joy and singing, with tambourines and lyres. But you didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters. You acted foolishly. I could do you great harm, but last night the God of your father said to me, 'Watch yourself. Don't say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' Now you have gone off because you long for your father's family, but why have you stolen my goats?" So here, Laban's first charge against Jacob is that he departed the family home without adhering to customs. If you were going home, if you were returning home, you honored the patriarch of the family, and you acknowledged them, and you announced that you were leaving. I know 2 weeks ago, Jacob said, "I'm going home," but then he offered to stay. The same way Jacob met Laban when he came, he should have confronted Laban and said, "Hey, I did 20 years of service. I'm going home." But he doesn't. He waits until Laban is away, and then he flees like a fugitive. Why? Because Jacob doesn't like to confront his problems. He likes to run away from them. And what happens to Jacob's problem that he thinks he's running away from? It catches up with him. Because all of our problems, generally, oftentimes, they catch up with us. And so here Laban says, "You deceived me. You didn't give me an opportunity to say goodbye to my daughters and my granddaughters." Now I want you to notice, Laban is totally playing the victim. And he is not the victim. He's the victimizer. Right? But again, this case is being tried in the court of public opinion, and Laban has got to pull on the heartstrings of those that are listening. He says, "Man, you defrauded me, man. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to my daughters. I didn't get a chance to kiss my grandkids. You just took the most precious things in my life and ran off." Notice Laban says, "You took my daughters like prisoners of war." Where did he get that from? Jacob hadn't stolen. He ain't kidnapped anybody. They willingly left. Laban doesn't know. His daughters aren't happy with him, and he's delusional about that. He thinks that Jacob is hoodwinked and bamboozled his daughter. They said, "No, your own daughters aren't happy with you. That's why we're leaving. It's not just me that's not happy. Your daughters aren't happy with you because you didn't keep their bridal money." Laban is a clown. And here he is playing the victim. Don't you hate people that don't you have problems with people that start trouble and keep chaos going, and then when it's brought to their attention, all of a sudden, woe is me, I'm the victim, why is everything, and then they want to get everybody's sympathy. You created this nonsense. And then look at the lies. Laban says, "Hey, if you had told me you wanted to leave, man, we would have had a party. We would have had tambourines and lyres. We would have sent you off with a big farewell party." Man, who believes that? Laban is lying through his teeth. Why? Because Laban has tried everything for 20 years to keep Jacob there. Why would he set him free? That's why he lied and did the switcheroo with Leah and Rachel in the beginning. Why? So he could get Jacob for another 7 years. And then after he worked the 14 years for the two daughters, then he said, no, man, stay and work on with me. You set your wages. Laban has done everything to hold on to Jacob. Why would any of us believe Laban would have let him go? Nobody believes that, right? And so again, the lies that Laban are spitting out here are just unbelievable. Now, he acknowledges his intent to exact retribution from Jacob for his actions, but the God of Jacob's father Isaac has warned him in a dream. Laban knows that Jacob longs for Isaac's family. How he knows that Jacob longs for Isaac's family is unknown to us. Perhaps Jacob had expressed that fact, that he was homesick at some point. Maybe he mentioned it repeatedly. We're not sure, but Laban says, I know you want to hurry up and get home. I know you long for your father's house in verse 30. But then the second charge is in verse 30. He says, look, I know you're homesick and you want to hurry up and get home to your father's family, but why have you stolen my gods? That's the second charge. The second charge is that Laban stopped off at home when he was packing up to go chase Jacob, and he realized that the family idols are missing. And he assumes that Jacob stole the idols. Now, you guys remember from 2 weeks ago what happened to those idols. What happened to the idols? That's right, Tim. Rachel stole those idols. But he's charging Jacob. Laban is clueless. He thinks his daughters have been kidnapped as prisoners of war. He's wrong about that. He's also wrong about who stole his idols. And so here he is making a false charge against Jacob. Now, what's interesting, Jacob's not going to take this lying down because he's got some steel in his spine. And so in verses 31 and 32, Jacob confesses to the first charge but categorically denies the second. But Jacob confesses to the first charge, but with conditions. Look at what Jacob does in verse 31. This is cool. Jacob says, he answered, I was afraid, for I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. I did the wrong thing because I was afraid. Now, those of you that have been with us from the very beginning, your mind goes back to Genesis 3. Remember when Adam and Eve hid themselves and God says, why are you guys hiding? Oh, we were afraid. We heard you walking. And they were afraid because they had sinned. And so fear causes people to do things they ought not do. And Jacob plays that fear card. He says, I didn't tell you I was leaving because I thought you would take your daughters. Why does he call them his wives? Interesting. They're not called Jacob's wives anywhere in this text. Laban doesn't refer to his daughters as Jacob's wives, and Jacob doesn't refer to them as his wives. If I was Jacob, I would have said, I was afraid. I thought you would take my wives from me by force. So he's afraid. So Jacob says, yeah, I'm guilty of the first charge, but it's because of you're a tyrant. And you've mistreated me over and over again the 20 years that I've been with you, so I was afraid. You didn't leave me any other choice. Then in verse 32, he rejects the second charge categorically. Verse 32 says, Jacob says to Laban, if you find your gods, watch this, with anyone here, he will not live. Before our relatives, point out anything that is yours and take it. Jacob did not know. Here's the editorial note. Jacob didn't know that Rachel had stolen the idols. Though not only has Rachel defrauded her father, but she's also put her husband in a precarious position because Jacob says, Laban, if you find those idols in my camp, whoever stole them is going to die today. That's a capital offense. He has no idea that the only wife he loves Rachel is the one that did it. He never would have said that if he knew his wife had those gods. So Rachel is man, she's got her husband and her dad in a precarious position. How would you, this is great drama. I mean, this is better than All My Children, One Life to Live. Like, how is this situation going to be resolved? Or as the world turns, I was a little kid. Don't tell nobody this, even though it's going to be on video. My stepmom used to record All My Children, One Life to Live on VHS back in the day when we had VCRs. And I would watch those soap operas. They were fascinating. I had no issues with any. The drama in the soap operas was just unbelievable, and it was must see TV for me, and so I just enjoyed it. I know a lot of adolescent boys aren't watching soap operas on TV, but I did, and they taught me some stuff that I probably didn't need to know. But it was fun. This is better than anything that I ever saw on those soap operas. Now, Laban he can't deal with the first charge because Jacob is rebutted that charge. He says, "Look, I was forced to do what I had to do because you're an oppressive tyrant, and I didn't have any other option." But Laban can do something about this. He's obsessed with these gods, and so Laban canvasses the camp in search for the idols. He don't find them idols because Jacob said the one that stole them, he should have said she will not live. Look at Laban in his search and seizure. He got a search warrant, and he's searching the camp. So watch the drama here. Moshe is a great author. Moses did a great job. Look at this, verse 33. It says, "So Laban went into Jacob's tent, didn't find anything. Then he went into Leah's tent. Didn't find anything. And then into the tents of the two concubines. Didn't find anything. When he left Leah's tent, he went to Rachel's tent. Bump, 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 bump. I mean, here's the drama picking up. If this was a movie, Tim would be playing some dramatic music on the keyboard right now. Dad is going to Rachel's tent. Verse 34 says, "Now Rachel had taken Laban's household gods." Yeah, we learned that 2 weeks ago. She put them in the saddlebag of the camel and sat on them. Laban searched the whole tent but found nothing. How is it that Laban searched Rachel's tent? She's sitting on the satchel in the bag where the idols are. Watch, verse 35 tells us. She said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord," or "Don't be angry, sir, that I cannot stand in your presence. I'm having my menstrual cycle." So Laban searched, but he could not find the household gods. So Rachel uses her period as an excuse for why because usually when dad comes into the room or whatever, you honor him by standing in his presence. And Rachel says, "Dad, if you would excuse me from this honor, I need to keep my seat." And she wasn't. So the question is, and Bear was asking me this morning because she was reading my notes last night. She says, "Daddy, Rachel had stolen her father's idols. Is she really having her period, or is she lying?" I says, "Honey, that's the real question. Maybe she's, again, duping her father again." I don't know. Who thinks that this is authentic, this is genuine, she's really menstruating, and she doesn't want to, show, maybe she has some blood stains, and she doesn't want to reveal that and shame herself. She's already designated as unclean and ceremonially unclean. And so how many people think she's really menstruating? Or who thinks this is just a charade? And she's just trying to keep from being found out by her father. What's interesting is that Moses is meticulously walking us through this search. I love how one author said this, Victor Hamilton. said this, that Laban's gods, these gods can be stolen, they can be hidden, these gods can even be sat on. Ideas which Orthodox Yahwehism would shudder at. These false gods can even be sat on, can be hidden, stolen. What kind of God is that? And so Jewish people would have laughed at these gods that can suffer and be manipulated like this. Now, much to Laban's chagrin, his search and seizure efforts have turned up empty. But how will Laban save face? Because he's charged Jacob with stealing these idols, and yet he's searched all the tents, and the idols have not been found. How do you save face? How do you keep from being embarrassed? Laban in saving face here, because every action and every word is being scrutinized by both camps in an effort to determine who's just in this dispute. And now Laban is embarrassed. Everybody's watching. And he's made a false charge. Well, he's made a right charge, but the reality is he hasn't turned up the evidence. One of the commentaries that I read is important, and there was a quote in this Christ-centered exposition exalting Jesus in Genesis that I wanted to share. I thought this was interesting, and so look at these slides with me, because they speak to what is motivating Laban here. And I thought this was really interesting, and I wanted to share these with you. You guys have these slides in your Coram Deo, but the Exalting Jesus commentary says this. In verse 33, he, referring to Laban, enters tent after tent, pursuing mere idols as items of utmost importance. Why? Because Laban believes they're powerful and fears what will happen to him if he does not have them, especially in the absence of Jacob, who has been a conduit of divine blessing over the years. So though Laban has been blessed by God through Jacob, he doesn't personally trust in the God of Jacob. He trusts instead in man-made idols. Laban reveals a pattern that is common amongst fallen humanity in this broken world. When we face adversity and life feels out of control, the temptation is to turn to idols of our own. Whether it's the household gods as Laban did, or modern day idols in the form of success, significance, security, satisfaction, and I added sex to give us a fifth S. Rather than turning upward in dependence, fallen humanity easily follows the path of Laban and turns inward in idolatry. Man, that's so right. Laban has been blessed by the God of Jacob, but he doesn't trust the God of Jacob, and so he clings to what he feels comfortable with and what he thinks is going to be his favor and his fortune in the absence of Jacob and Jacob's God. And guys, when we get pushed into a corner, when we experience difficulties and hardships and adversities, sometimes it's not just fallen humanity. I think sometimes as believers, when we feel like our back is up against the wall, sometimes we reach for the idols too. Sometimes we got to have that success or that significance, that security. We've got to have the satisfaction, the sex, whatever it is that brings us gratification and makes us feel better about ourselves, as opposed to leaning into God and helping Him walk us through this moment. We need to feel good. So I'm going to go to Amazon and I'm going to make a purchase. Or I'm going to eat this whole pizza or this whole bucket of ice cream, or I'm going to turn on some pornography or whatever the thing is. Or I got to smoke this blunt, or I got to go hang out with the fellas and or my girls. We've all got our things. And here Laban is the poster child for what happens when we feel backed into a corner and we feel like God is not enough. Hey, God, you're not my all in all and my everything. I need something else right now. You're good, but I need something else in this moment. And so I disagree with the commentator because I don't think this is just fallen humanity. I think this is a people problem, whether you're a believer or unbeliever. So may we be the type of people who resist the urge to reach for the idols in a crisis. May we reach for our God, for the unchanging hand of God. As the old folks used to say in the black church where I come from, that God's hands are not too short to reach us. They used to sing the song, I'm leaning on the everlasting arms. Because that's what we should reach for in the time of crisis. And Laban doesn't do that. And if we're honest with ourselves, neither do we. So Laban confronts Jacob in verses 22 through 35. Now he wants to covenant with Jacob in verses 36 through 55. But Jacob wants to level some counter charges against Uncle Whitey and these injustices that he wants to recount, because Laban has made himself the victim in this ordeal, and Jacob wants to make a counter argument against his uncle in the court of public opinion. And so Jacob is going to now defend himself and interrogate Laban. Watch this. It says, then Jacob became incensed. He was angry. He was burning mad because of the charges because of Laban's false charges against him. So he brings charges against Laban. So he says, Uncle, what is my crime? What is my sin that you have pursued me? You've searched all of my possessions and you've found nothing of yours. Put it here before my relatives and your relatives and let them decide between the two of us. Jacob is saying, hey, you've embarrassed me. You've called my character into question. Now Jacob, the rascal, finally has some character. And finally, he's not happy that Laban has impugned his character. And when people call your character into question and want to cast shadows on your integrity, none of us feel good about that. And so Jacob is calling Laban to task. And I wonder if Jacob's counter arguments are persuasive here. In verse 38, Jacob says, and there's this inclusio here in verses 38 and 41. Jacob brackets his counter argument with the fact that he's been with Laban for 20 years. Look at verse 38. He says, I've been with you these 20 years, and your ewe lambs and female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten rams from your flock. I did not bring you any of the flock torn by wild beasts. I myself bore the loss. You demanded payment for me for what was stolen by day or by night. Jacob says, you've treated me unfairly. How so? Jacob says, hey, none of your female goats or lambs have miscarried while they were in my care. Your flocks flourished while I was shepherding them. I never took a ram for myself to have a meal or a feast or a fiesta. Never took anything that was yours. Verse 38. Then here's the injustice in verse 39. Jacob says, I didn't bring you any of the flock torn by wild beasts. Usually a shepherd, if while in his care, if any of the flock were attacked by a predator, the shepherd is supposed to bring the owner of the sheep the carcass of the goat or the sheep that had been ravaged by a predator, and then the owner is the one that's supposed to bear the loss if something from the flock was attacked by a predator. The owner bore the loss. But Jacob says, no, if any of the flock was attacked and killed while they were under my watch, I bore the loss. I paid for it. It wasn't Jacob's responsibility, but he owned it. Jacob also says, you demanded payment from me for what was stolen by day and by night. That's also an injustice, because shepherds were responsible and culpable for sheep that had been stolen, or any from the flock that was stolen during the day. If they were stolen at night, the owner was responsible for the financial loss if it happened at night. The shepherd is responsible if it happened during the day. Jacob says, I paid for sheep and goats that were stolen both by day and by night. That's an injustice. And Jacob owns it all. Then in verse 40 he says, there I was. The heat consumed me by day and the frost by night, and fled my eyes. He said, I worked my tail off. And the sweltering heat of the day and the biting cold at night, I had to fight through insomnia and sleepless times in order to do a good job for you, because I cared about my work ethic for you, Uncle. And then he reminds him again, it's been 20 years, verse 41. For 20 years in your household I served you, 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Now, 10 times is, again, not literal. Jacob is saying you've continually and repeatedly said, oh, you're going to make this much, and then you're going to make that much, and then you're going to make this much, and there's just this charade going on over and over again as Laban has manipulated and mistreated Jacob. Then in verse 42, Jacob says, if it had not been for the Lord by my side, tell me, where would I be? Verse 42, Jacob says, if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac had not been with me, certainly you would have sent me off empty-handed. But God has seen my affliction, my hard work, and has issued his verdict last night. When God came to Laban and said, don't say anything good or bad to Jacob, he said that was the verdict that God has rendered against, that I'm innocent of the charges you've made against me. Oh, if it had not been for the Lord by my side. Tell me, where would have, Jacob says, man, if it had been up to you, I would have left empty-handed. Jacob came to Laban empty-handed, and Jacob says, if it had been up to you, you tyrant, I would have left empty-handed. But thank God, I went from rags to riches because of God. Because men will leave us impoverished and leave us needy, but God. And so Jacob is giving all glory to God. Now I want you to notice something. I want you to see Jacob's character evolution happening right before our eyes. Usually Jacob has been dependent upon shaking and moving and manipulating and deceiving and tricking and treachery and all of the stuff, right? Who is he giving glory to, God? Jacob is changing. I told you, he never gets totally right, but he makes a little bit of improvement. And guys, if we can just get a little bit closer to Jesus, I think that'll be all right. Some of us don't have to go from sinner to full-on saint. Let's just get a little further away from sinner and a little more to saint. We don't have to go all the way. Jacob never made it all the way, and he in heaven. And so Jacob is evolving. He's improving. He's becoming more godly. But it takes him 20 years, and that's okay. So Laban has got to save face somehow. So Laban has got to cut a covenant with Jacob. That's the only way to save face, man. Let's just make an agreement. We're gonna agree to disagree, and we're gonna go our separate ways, and we're gonna bid each other farewell, and we'll never see each other again. And that's just the way it's gonna be. So Laban has to maintain his honor by cutting this covenant with Jacob. Now I want you to notice in the text that there are a bunch of twos in the text there, and we'll see them as we get into the passage. But I want you to notice that Moses sets this up in the reality of twos. And watch this. There will be 2 patriarchs that are engaged in this covenant. There are also these cairns that will be erected. there are two purposes served by these cairns. Two place names given to these locations, two languages referenced, two stipulations stated in the covenant, and two invocations are noted, and two meals enjoyed. Walk through this because there are couplets here in this text, and Moses has inserted these in the text, and we want to point them out. Verse 43. Then Laban said to Yaakov, the daughters are my daughters. Your children are my children. The flocks are my flocks. Everything is mine. Mine, 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 mine. Now he's wrong. Those daughters are his daughters, but they're also Jacob's wives. Those are his grandchildren, but them Jacob's kids. And the flocks that Jacob has, this massive flock that he now has, he earned those. He did a little trickeration, but he earned those fair and square. Why is Laban saying that everything Jacob has is his? He's wrong about that too. But Laban says, but what can I do today for these daughters of mine and for these children they have borne? Come now, verse 44 and 45, come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between the two of us. So Jacob picked out a stone and set it up as a marker. Jacob is going to mark this covenant with a cairn. Then Jacob, in verse 46, said to his relatives, gather stones, and they took stones and made a mound, and they ate a meal there by the mound. So they've set up this mound of rocks, and then they eat a meal. That's the first of the two. Laban named the mound Yagar Sahadutha, and Jacob named it Galeed. Each of these names means a mound of witness. Laban is an Aramean, so he uses Aramaic, and so he names this mound and this place in Aramaic. Jacob speaks Hebrew or early form, primitive form of Hebrew, and he names it Galeed. Two names, two languages referenced here by the same mound in the same place. Jacob says in verse 48, this mound is a witness between you and me today. Therefore, the place is called Galeed. It's also mitzvah for Jacob said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of each other's sight. Jacob and Laban don't trust each other. There is hesitancy and apprehension about entering into this covenant because they've entered some agreements and Laban didn't always keep his word. And so the text says, may God watch between us. Since I don't trust you and you don't trust me, may God watch between us since neither one of us are trustworthy. God will be the judge. Here are the stipulations to the covenant. If you mistreat my daughters, Laban says, or take other wives, though no one is with us, understand that God will be a witness between you and me. Laban also said to Jacob, look at this mound and the marker that I have set up. So Laban had also set up a marker. So there are two markers and two mounds. He said, may this mound be a marker between you and me. Verse 51. Now, verse 52, this mound, Laban says, is a witness. And the marker is a witness that I will not pass beyond this mound to you, and you will not pass beyond this mound and this marker to do me harm. So the marker serves as a witness of the covenant, and it also serves as a location marker to say, hey, I won't trespass this marker to come to do you harm, and you won't come past this marker to do me harm. Jacob, if he's back in the promised land, he's got to go north to harm Laban, and Laban has to come south to harm Jacob. Neither one of them can pass that marker to do the other one harm. Verse 53, then here are the two invocations to the gods. He says, the God of Abraham, and the gods of Nahor, the gods of their father will judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. The fear of Isaac is a unique name for God. It connotes the idea that God is the one who creates dread and fear in all people, and He is the God of Isaac. And so this is the name that Jacob uses in verse 42, and he uses it again for God. It's never used after this, so this is a unique name in this situation. Because remember, God calls fear for Laban in the dream. He said, don't say anything to Jacob and don't touch him. And so Laban feared God, and so he listens to the God of Jacob. And that's the kind of fear and dread that God produces for people who encounter him in Scripture. Verse 54, before we get to our last verse, says, Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and invited his relatives to eat a meal. There's a second meal. So they ate a meal and spent the night on the mountain. Now, here are some examples of 3 cairns that have been set up. One is on a cliff. The second picture is of these pebbles that have been stacked on another. The third picture is of a cairn that had been set up in Yosemite by some folks that had visited these hot springs. And so these cairns are set up as mounds and as markers to remind people of their visit or some oath that was taken or some experience. Usually they marked there were monuments or whatever that marked grave sites. Usually they were markers to mark off something significant that had taken place on that site. And so the stones being built together is a reminder of that significant event that took place on that site. And here are just some examples of what those look like. Last verse, 55, and then we'll get to our Coram Deos. It says, Laban got up early in the morning, the next morning, kissed his grandchildren and granddaughters and blessed them. Then Laban left and returned home. What's interesting is that when Laban first met Jacob, remember when Jacob first arrived, what happened? Laban ran to meet him, hugged him, and kissed him and said, nephew, my sister's son is here. He don't get no hugs, no kisses, no goodbye, no farewell, nothing in verse 55. He's totally ignored. He's persona non grata. Kisses his daughters, kisses his grandchildren, totally ignores Jacob. Now remember, Laban's probably never going to see his daughters and his grandchildren ever again. So this is a bitter, bitter farewell for this dad to say goodbye to his daughters and his grandchildren. So this was probably an emotional moment for Laban and even for these girls that are not happy with their dad. To bid him farewell one last time must have been a pretty emotional scene in this farewell. Look at the Coram Deos that are in your Coram Deo. You can read along with me. You guys have these. The first one says this, and we've been reiterating this from the outset. You can't run away from your problems. They'll always find you. We've got to confront our problems. We can't run away from every problem, because if we run away from every problem, we'll always be what? Running. And Jacob is learning a hard lesson. He's 65 years old, and he's too old to be running. And God wants us to confront our problems. Number 2, Jacob has learned over the course of 20 years to depend on the God of his fathers and not on his tricks and on his treachery. Jacob says, but God, you would have sent me away empty-handed, but God has blessed me. He's caused me to flourish. He's caused me to thrive. He's caused me to prosper. Why? Because I worked hard and I conducted myself with character and with integrity and with honesty and with hard work. And so God has blessed me. Jacob didn't have to connive and didn't have to deceive. He just had to work hard and trust God. And God made a way for him out of no way. Number 3, when we encounter hardships, difficulties, and adversities, may we not reach for the idols, but instead for the living God, who alone is our shield and our exceedingly great reward. Remember, God told his grandfather Avram in Genesis 15:1, he says, Avram, I am your shield and I am your exceedingly great reward. That God is our all in all and our everything. He's all we could ever want and he's all we could ever need. May we reject the urge to reach for the idols. And may we reach for our great God who's worthy to be praised. Can we pray together? God, we thank you for this moment. We thank you for this lesson. Thank you that we get an opportunity to see Jacob evolve before our eyes. We see Jacob taking kingdom steps closer and closer to who you are, Lord, as he puts away the tricks and the deception and the lies and the manipulation, and he trusts you with his hard work day and night. He's a man of his word. He works 7 years for Rachel, and then when he's tricked, he works another 7 years to get Rachel, and then he fulfills the 6 years work. He does what he says, and he says what he does, which is a far cry from what Jacob used to be like. So God, thank you that you're a God who continues to walk with us and to challenge us and to convict us and convince us to be more like you and to be about righteousness and justice and Christ-like character and integrity. God, you care more about our character than you do our comfort. So Jesus, would you shape us and mold us into who you are so that we can be your ambassadors as we reconcile the world to you. Jacob gives us hope that as you instilled your virtues in him, that Jacob is starting to finally showcase godliness. We thought it would never happen, but it's happening right before our eyes. So God, would you do that same work in our head, in our hearts, and in our hands? Make us more like Jesus for your glory and for your sake. Amen.